So, Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life is said to have been written in the 8th century. I'm not very sure about that, but this is what I've heard. In any case, from Lord Maitreya down to his disciple Sangha and so forth, the line of extensive path, lineage, masters, and Master Nagarjuna, who was known as renowned as the second Buddha of this particular teaching of Shakyamuni. Through him came, as we usually say, past the profound view lineage. And then with regard to the lineage of teaching, the transmission of this particular text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, is also called the Lobchen Chugyu, which means the great conduct lineage. And so with regards to Lord Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alankara, what it explicitly what it explicates is the implicit content of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras that were taught by the Buddha. Whereas the wisdom, these Perfection of Wisdom sutras or discourses explicitly teach that of the theory of emptiness. And then another text by Maitreya is Mahayana Uttara Tantra, which goes through the teaching of, which covers the teaching of Tathagata Garbha. So the 5 treatises of Maitreya deal with the Bodhisattva path mainly. And so with these texts by Maitreya as the basis, then Shantideva explains in detail the Bodhisattva path. And then with regard to Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he explains the explicit content of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, which is emptiness. So when his masters of India commented on the teaching of the Buddha, the philosophical schools of Vaibhashika and Sautrantika deals with selflessness of persons, and they do not teach or cover selflessness of phenomena. Whereas in the Chittamatra and Madhyamaka philosophical schools, they do touch or teach those that of selflessness of phenomena as well. With regard to the Chittamatra, they while asserting a true existence of consciousness, they say that the externality of things, they deny the externality of things, saying that the things that appear to our consciousness, sensorial or mental, are reflections of the imprints on our mind of those things. And so they reject any externality of things, while also positing what are known as the 3 svabhava, the 3 natures, which are the dependent nature, imputed nature, and the consummate or perfect nature. And so, based on this is very similar to that of the quantum physics. So quantum physicists and some quantum physicists also say that when someone is fully convinced that nothing objectively exists, it actually helps their with their reaction to situations not going too extreme emotionally. And so similarly, it is the case with the Chittamatra view. That when you are convinced of this philosophical view that there is no externality of things, but things are reflections of our imprints on our mind, it reduces that of attachment and so forth to external things. And then, with regard to Madhyamaka philosophy, there are two sub-schools, Savatantrika Madhyamakas and the Prasangika Madhyamakas. And within the former, there are those of these Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamakas and the Sotrantika Savatantrika Madhyamakas. In any case, both of these Savatantrika Madhyamakas schools also do assert that there is some kind of objective existence in things, whereas the Prasangikas reject any objective independent existence of things. So following Master Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti and masters like Chandrakirti reject any objective independent existence in things and experience our experiences for them. So with regard to the transmission of the teaching, this book I received from Kunalama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen, who was himself practitioner of mainly this particular text, and every day he reflected on Bodhisattva, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, and then he wrote a book, one verse each every day, which formed the book, the Jewel Lamp. And so, by seeing that book by him, I was inspired about that of the Bodhicitta. And therefore, I received the transmission of his writing, the Jewel Lamp, and also after that, the transmission of this particular text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And so, since he said that this the practice of bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, is going to be very effective and helpful for people, and he found that helpful. Therefore, he told me that I should give more teachings on this particular text. And so, with regards to the summary of this text, it can be summarized into 3 points. The practices in which you enter, and then the actual practice, and then the accomplishment of the practice or the conduct. So this particular text deals with the path leading to enlightenment, based on that of the understanding and development of wisdom, on the basis of which you develop that or those of the Bodhisattva conduct, the practice of the Bodhisattva conduct. So the first chapter is the benefit of awakening mind, or the bodhicitta, and then the second chapter is disclosure of wrongdoing or confession. And so the second chapter is about confessing our wrongdoings, which forms a branch of the practice of bodhicitta. And then there is no separate chapter on generosity in this text. So since this text itself deals with the practice of giving, such as giving one's resources, body, wealth, and so forth, and as well as one's wholesome deeds or virtues in the different parts of this text, it doesn't have a separate chapter for generosity, practice of generosity, whereas in the third chapter is about full acceptance of the awakening mind or bodhicitta. And as part of the practice of morality, the perfection of morality, this text deals with that of conscientiousness or hatefulness. And then also, since it also is very important to be vigilant about one's practice of bodhicitta, the fifth chapter deals with that of guarding alertness or vigilance. And then the sixth chapter is about patience or tolerance, and seventh chapter, enthusiasm or joyous effort. And then the eighth chapter is about meditation, and ninth chapter, wisdom. And then the final chapter is on dedication. So we have covered until the sixth chapter last year. So of the 10 chapters, the most important chapters of this text are the sixth chapter on patience and the eighth chapter on meditation. Why? Because the sixth chapter teaches patience, which is to say that it teaches the antidote to anger. In order to be able to cherish others over oneself, we need to be able to counter our anger. And so that forms the basis, that creates a basis for our love and affection towards others. And then in the eighth chapter, it teaches that cherishing oneself alone actually is the cause for one's own ruin in the temporary and long-term cases. So the sixth chapter on patience is very important, and the eighth chapter on meditation, although the title of this chapter is given meditation, the main practice of this chapter is the practice of equaling and exchanging self with others, and therefore these two chapters, 6th and 8th, form the most important chapters of this text. So chapter 7 on having patience, I should develop enthusiasm, for awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. So with regard to progressing along the path, it doesn't happen only through that of the having cultivated and developed that of bodhicitta, the altruistic spirit of enlightenment, but you need to use wisdom to progress along the path. The moment you have experienced developed the genuine experience of bodhicitta, this altruistic intention to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, you have become a bodhisattva. You have entered the bodhisattva path, and then you need to still train yourself further to progress and tread along the path to enlightenment, which is to say that after having entered the path of accumulation at the time when you generate that of the genuine bodhicitta, then you next have to develop the path of application or preparation, where you need to develop that of the union of the vipassana and shamatha, in other words, the single-pointed concentration and that of the special insight, penetrative insight. And then you go along, you actually progress through the 4 stages of the path of preparation, and then when you realize emptiness directly, So with regards to that path of preparation, you need to develop that combination of shamatha and vipassana, which is focused on emptiness, and then you progress towards that path of seeing, where you realize emptiness directly, and at that point you actually have developed the path, which is an antidote to the adventitious mental afflictions. And then after having realized the path of seeing and having developed that of this true cessation, then you still progress further on the path of meditation. And so, as you progress along the path of meditation, which begins with the second Bodhisattva ground, and through to you go through to the 10th Bodhisattva ground, which is, and then you finally develop that path or insight which counters. Which serves as the antidote to the even the residual stains or left by those of the mental afflictions, the kleshas, and once you have overcome all these defilements, including these. Defilements which are left by those of the imprints or left by those of the negative emotions, then you actually attain that of the Buddhahood. And so in this way you progress along the path, the five-tiered path, which is referred by that of the path of accumulation, starting with path of accumulation, referred by that of the mantra of Heart Sutra, which says Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisoha. So the first two Gates refer to the path of accumulation, then the third Paragate refers to the path of seeing, and then the Parasamgate refers to the path of meditation, and finally, when you have overcome all the delusions and imprints of the delusions, you reach the Buddhahood, that is referred by Bodhisattva. And therefore it says, for an awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves, just as there is no movement without wind. And therefore, in order to tread along the path to enlightenment, one needs to see the pros and cons of developing the path within oneself and not developing the path within oneself. And of course, the Buddha, you need to see what is the benefit or the purpose of developing the path within yourself, and what is the disadvantage of not doing so. And of course, the Buddha gave his teachings in accordance with the different mental dispositions of his disciples. And accordingly, the disciples are able to actually take on the teachings and integrate them within themselves as they befit, according to their own dispositions. And therefore, here what is said is, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. And therefore, one has to see the advantage of putting effort in the path, and therefore, it says, having patience, or I should develop enthusiasm. For awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. So what is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. Its opposing factors are explained. A laziness, attraction to what is harmful, and despising oneself out of despotism. This is having low esteem of oneself, that I will not be able to accomplish such and so and so. Because of attachment to the pleasures of taste of idleness, because of craving for sleep, and because of having no disillusion with the misery of secular existence, laziness grows very strong. So unless you're able to become aware that laziness actually does not led you to make development in the path, you will not try to overcome it. Enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions, I have entered the snare of birth. Why am I still not aware that I live in the mouth of Lord of Death? Do I not see that he is systematically slaughtering my species? Whoever remains soundly asleep surely behaves like a buffalo with a butcher. When having blocked off every escape route, the Lord of Death is looking for someone to kill. How can I enjoy eating? And likewise, how can I enjoy sleep? So here you need to meditate on the impermanence of life and impermanence and death. Otherwise, holding on to some kind of a permanence of yourself, that you will live for some time and not becoming aware that you may die in the next days, you will not actually inspire you to practice the Dharma. So in regard to past and future lives, the non-Buddhist traditions assert past and future lives on the basis of the theory that there is an independent soul. Whereas the non-Buddhist, the Buddhist tradition asserts that there's no self or a soul which is independent from the body and mind combination or the psychophysical aggregates. So there is no, according to Buddhism, there is no permanent, single and autonomous self or soul. And also that there is no self-sufficiently substantially existent self as well, within which there are two strands. Which one is that kind of self is something which has similar attributes to the psychophysical aggregates, and then there is this kind of self which does not have any attributes of the psychophysical aggregates. So when you do this kind of analysis and say that the self is not something which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates, then what you also try to do is you try to assert that the self should be there from within the aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates, which comprise of the 5 aggregates. And so these aggregates, the skandhas, are subject to momentary change because they are created through causes and conditions. And within the impermanence of our psychophysical aggregates, there is a gross aspect of, or the coarser understanding of impermanence, and also a subtle impermanence. The fact that things which are brought about created by causes and conditions are subject to moment by moment change. That moment by moment change in things is subtle impermanence. And so these things which are created through causes and conditions themselves have the causes which are substantial cause. For example, in the case of the consciousness, for example, our own visual consciousness, the visual consciousness or eye consciousness must have its own previous moment, which is similar in aspect to it. And so it has to have its own, in other words, the substantial cause, which is the previous moment of substantial this visual consciousness. So just as in the external case of the matters, case of matters outside, we need to have causes which are similar to the result or the effect. Likewise, with regard to consciousness, for example, that of the visual consciousness, there has to be a substantial cause, which is a previous moment of the visual consciousness. And so, since there is no beginning to that of the consciousness, what is said is that consciousness must come from a consciousness or be produced by a consciousness as its substantial cause. And so on the basis of this understanding of the similar type of consciousness, we actually assert past and future lives. So, in other words, here it's important also to meditate on impermanence, the fact that things are subject to change. So at this moment, we are all healthy and happy, relaxed. But if you ask, are we all going to meet again tomorrow? It's difficult to say, to guarantee that we will meet tomorrow. We cannot guarantee 100%. And therefore, by reflecting on impermanence, we should understand that this life is not permanent, and therefore it helps to counter our attachment to the pleasures of this life. So verse number 5 says, "Do I not see that he is systematically slaughtering my species? Whoever remains sound in his sleep surely behaves like a buffalo with a butcher," and so forth. For as long as death is, verse number 7, for as long as death is actually approaching, then I shall accumulate merit. Even if I then put a stop to laziness, what will be the use? That is not the time. So at the time of death, nothing helps your wealth, money, your family, your relatives, friends, and so forth. None of them will help you. But what helps you, what would help you in the next life is the imprint that you leave from your virtuous practices. So your fame, wealth, and with resources and so forth, none of them will help you at the time of death. Then, so for as long as death is actually approaching, then I shall accumulate merit. Even if I then put stop to laziness, what will be the use? That is not mine. At the time when this has not been done, when this is being done, and when this is only half finished, suddenly the Lord of Death will come, and the thought will occur, "Oh no, I'm done for." And there, at that time, all your relatives and family will just cry at your death, and they will make some offering to the three jewels and so forth, like making butter lamb offering and so forth. So if you have actually practiced virtue, which will give you confidence that you will not have to regret in this life the way you have lived it, then that will also help you. Their face is flowing with tears, and their eyes red and swollen with sorrow. My relatives will finally lose hope, and I shall behold the visions of messengers of death, tormented by the memory of my wrongdoing, and hearing the sounds of hell. In terror I shall clothe my body in excrement. What virtue can I do in such a delirious state? If even this life I shall be gripped, even in this life I shall be gripped with fear, like that of a live fish being rolled in hot sand, why even mention the unbearable agonies of hell that will result from my unwholesome deeds? What can I remain at ease like this? How can I remain at ease like this? So without having any confidence that you have actually done virtuous practices, but that you may have accumulated wealth, I mean, how can you expect to help yourself in the next life. So how can I remain at ease like this when I have committed the actions that will bear fruit in my delicate infant's body, encountering boiling acids in the hell of tremendous heat? Much harm befalls those with little forbearance, and those who want results without making any effort. While clasped by death, they shall try like the gods. Oh no, I am overcome by misery. Relying upon the boat of human body, free yourself from the great river of pain, as it is hard to find this boat again. This is no time for sleep, you fool. Due to the influence, being under the influence of mental afflictions, we are born with these contaminated psychophysical aggregates, which is a source of suffering, and therefore we are in this ocean of suffering, of samsara. And therefore, the body that we have obtained now, this human body, is likened to that of a boat. It says, relying upon the boat of human body, free yourself from great river of pain. Because it is difficult to find such a human body, a precious human body, again and again. So all of us, human beings, and the other insects and other creatures are all same in not wanting suffering, but wanting happiness. So as human beings, we have this brain with which we can actually help ourselves to think about what causes bring about that of suffering and what causes bring about happiness. To think about that. So since living beings came into being or developed in this universe, it's been about a billion years, more than a billion years. And then there has been evolution of the different species, including human beings. And this brain of human beings is something which is unique. So today in the world we are 7 billion people. So most of this 7 billion are indulging or think only about the external material gains, and there are very few who actually think about the inner world of mind. So it's said that there are over 6 billion people who believe in some kind of religious tradition. But amongst the 6 billion, there are very few who actually understand that our happiness and pain are dependent on our mind itself. And it's only in the classical Indian traditions that there is this kind of awareness. And so the Buddha belongs to this tradition of India. So with regards to the dealing with our emotions, it is only found called the precise and thorough practices of dealing with our emotions is found only in the Indian tradition. So the Buddha was product of that tradition. So of course there is the method of dealing with our emotions that are taught by the Buddha. So we tend to regard Buddha as if he's like a creator god. That's not the case. Buddha himself has said that the Buddhas or sages do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they remove their suffering with their hands, nor do they transfer their own realization into others. But by teaching reality, the sages lead beings to liberation. And also, the Buddha has taught the 4 seals of the Dharma, which are that the all compounded phenomena are impermanent, all uncontaminated things are subject to suffering, and things are without self and are empty, and so forth. And so the Buddha has given these teachings, but we do not understand that it is dependent upon us whether we will reach that of nirvana or not, without understanding that things are impermanent and so forth. We have this kind of a notion that the Buddha will help us. That's not the case. And then we also have this thought that there are so-called enemies or evil beings, evil forces and so forth outside of us who actually hinder our practices, harm us and so forth. But actually the real enemy and evil force is within ourselves, our negative mental afflictions. So this boat is difficult to find again. And so this human body is said to be have this attribute of leisure and endowment. And so 8 leisurely circumstances, and then 10 endowments. Having rejected the supreme joy of the sacred Dharma, which is a boundless source of delight, why am I distracted by the cause of pain? Of course, we all do not want suffering, but want happiness. The main happiness that we should focus on is the mental ones, not the physical or the sensorial pleasure. And so the ultimate happiness or blissful experience is that of the 4th seal of Dharma, which is that nirvana is peace. So nirvana is our goal. So why do I enjoy frivolous amusements and the like? Next is dealing with that of the second type of laziness, which is said to be the attraction to bad things. And the third one is that of the despising oneself, low self-esteem, laziness of low self-esteem. When you say that, I cannot really accomplish that goal of enlightenment, that's the type of laziness. If you say that I cannot do anything, I cannot achieve anything. And so if you have this kind of low self-esteem, there's no liberation, freedom from suffering. And therefore, without indulging in despondency, I should gather the supports for enthusiasm and earnestly take control of myself. Then, by seeing the equality between self and others, I should practice exchanging self for others. And so you should have the enthusiasm to pursue the path. So It teaches that of developing and cultivating equality of oneself and others, and exchanging self with others. I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? For the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. If they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. So the Buddha has said that even these the creatures, the flies like mosquitoes and so forth, have Buddha nature. And so when they meet with the right condition and have actually put effort and with enthusiasm, even they could attain Buddhahood. It'll be so if I do not forsake the Bodhisattva's way of life. So Buddha himself, if we look at the life of the Buddha, the Jataka tales and so forth, we find that the Buddha had actually cultivated the path over countless eons, and which may make us feel discouraged. Why should someone like myself, who has been born in the human race, not attain awakening, since I'm able to recognize what is beneficial and what is harm? Nevertheless, it frightens me to think that I may have to give away my arms and legs without discriminating between what is heavy and what is light. I am reduced to fear through confusion. For over countless myriads of eons I have been cut, stabbed, burnt, and flayed alive innumerable times, but I have not awakened. Yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. It is like the suffering of having an incision made in order to remove and destroy greater pain. Even doctors eliminate illness with unpleasant medical treatments. So in order to overcome manifold sufferings, I should be able to put up with some discomfort. Yet the Supreme Physician does not employ common medical treatments such as these with an extremely gentle technique. He remedies all the greatest ills. At the beginning, the guide of the world encourages that the giving of such things as food. Later, when accustomed to this, one may progressively start to give away even one's flesh. Because at such a time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, then what hardship would there be when it came to giving away my flesh? Having forsaken all transgression, there would be no suffering, and so forth. And so the Bodhisattvas make this kind of prayer: as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the transmigrators. So when Bodhisattvas make such when they develop such courage, they would make such prayer, aspiration. And in the Ratnavali by Nagarjuna, he says that even if I were to become enlightened, even if some few sentient beings remained behind, may I still remain to lead them to liberation, enlightenment. And therefore, the time doesn't really matter to someone who is dedicated for the well-being of others. So if you are not fatigued in your mind and heart, then however long it may take, you will never feel tired of working for others. So, having mounted the horse of awakening mind that dispels all discouragement and weariness, when they know of this mind that proceeds from joy to joy, would ever lapse into despondency. So this is a very important point that Shantideva is making. And then the next verse, number 31, says the supports when working for the sake of living beings as aspirations, steadfastness, joy and rest. aspiration is developed through fear of misery and by contemplating the benefits of aspiration itself. Thus, in order to increase my enthusiasm, I should strive to abandon its opposing forces, to amass the supports of aspiration, self-confidence, joy and rest, to practice in earnest and to become strong in self-control. I shall have to overcome the boundless faults of myself and others, and in order to destroy each of these faults alone, I may have to strive until the ocean of eons is exhausted. Yet, if within myself I do not perceive even a fraction of the perseverance required to exhaust these faults, then why do I not have a heart attack? For now I have become an abode for infinite misery. Likewise, I shall have to realize many excellent qualities of myself and others, and in order to attain each of these qualities alone, I may have to acquaint myself with its course until an ocean of eons is exhausted. However, I have never developed acquaintance with even a fraction of these excellences. How strange it is to squander this birth I have found by some coincidence. I have not made offering to the Lord Buddhas. I have not given the pleasure of great festivals. I have not performed actions for teachings. I have not fulfilled the wishes of the poor. I have not granted fearlessness to the frightened, and I have not given happiness to the weak. All I have given rise to is the agonies of the womb, mother's womb, and to suffering. Both now and in previous lives, such deprivation has arisen because of my lack of aspiring for the Dharma. Who would ever reject this aspiring for Dharma? So verse number 43, verse number 44 down teaches the results of virtues, practicing virtue, and the results of the non-virtuous actions. So as a result of virtue, I shall dwell in this spacious, fragrant and cool heart of a lotus. My radiance will be nourished by the food of the conqueror's sweet speech. My glorious form will spring from a lotus unfolded by the mighty one's light. And as a Bodhisattva, I shall abide in the presence of the conquerors. However, as a result of non-virtue, my skin will be ripped off by the henchmen of Yama, Lord of Death. In this feeble state, liquid copper melted by tremendous heat will be poured into my body, pierced by flazing swords, daggers. My flesh will be cut into flesh pieces, and I shall tumble upon the fiercely blazing iron ground. And next verse mentions Vajradvaja. It says, having undertaken the whole sum in the manner of Vajradvaja, which is one of the chapters of Avatamsaka Sutra, which actually teaches the Bodhisattva conduct or practices extensively. And it is the Chinese translation of this sutra seems to be longer than perhaps the Tibetan one. So when I should then proceed to acquaint myself with self-confidence. So you have to actually check whether you will be able to pursue something, these practices or not. First of all, I should examine, what is to be done, and to see whether I can pursue it or cannot undertake it. If I'm unable, it is best to leave it. But once I have started, I must not withdraw. If I do, then this habit will continue in other lives, and wrongdoing and misery will increase. And also, actions done at the time of its fruition will be weak and will not be accomplished. So you should have what is known as this pride of being able to undertake the action. Self-confidence should be applied to wholesome actions and overcoming of disturbing conceptions or mental afflictions, and my ability to do this, thinking I alone shall do it, is the self-confidence of action. and powerless, their minds disturbed. People in this world are unable to benefit themselves. Therefore, I shall do it for them, since unlike me, these beings are incapable. So it would be best for me to have no such pride. So this pride is the afflictive kind of pride. In verse number 51, when crows encounter a dying snake, they will act as though they were eagles. Likewise, if my self-confidence is weak, I shall be injured by the slightest downfalls. How can those who, out of faint-heartedness, have given up trying to find liberation because of their deficiency, yet even the greatest obstacle will find it hard to overcome? One with a firm mind. Therefore, with a steady mind, I shall overcome all faults. For if I am defeated by a fall, my wish to vanquish the 3 rams will become a joke. I'll conquer everything, and nothing at all shall conquer me. I, a child of the lion-like conqueror, should remain self-confident in this way. Whoever has self-importance is destroyed by it, is disturbed and has no self-confidence. For those with self-confidence do not succumb to the power of the enemy, whereas the former are under the sway of the enemy of self-importance. So if you remain selfish and full of yourself, then you will at some point remain lonely. Inflated by the disturbing conceptions of my self-importance, I shall be led by it to the lower realms. It destroys the joyous festival of human being. I shall become a slave, eating the food of others, stupid, ugly, feeble, and everywhere disrespected. Tough people bloated by conceit are also counted among the self-important. Tell me, what is more pathetic than this? If I find myself amidst a crowd of disturbing conceptions, I shall endure them in 1,000 ways, like a lion amongst foxes. I will not be affected by this disturbing host, just as men will guard their eyes when great danger and turmoil occur. Likewise, I shall never be swayed by the disturbances within my mind, even at times of great strife. It would be better for me to be burned, to have my head cut off, and to be killed, rather than ever bowing down to those ever-present disturbing conceptions. So the text deals with mainly the practice of Bodhisattva, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment. If you are able to have the genuine experience of it, you'll be happy, relaxed, calm, and so forth. And then when this experience of bodhicitta is helped by that of the wisdom of emptiness, then you will be able to tread along the path to happiness, from happiness or joy to joy. So with regards to the practice of equaling and exchanging self and others, what Shantideva advises us is never to feel discouraged about it. 이제 코로졌어. So when you are totally discouraged and feel low, then of course you will not be able to move yourself to pursue the practices. And of course, when you feel tired, you need to take rest. So if I feel that I never have enough sensual objects, which are like honey smeared upon a razor's edge, then why should I ever feel that I have enough merit which ripens in happiness and peace? Thus, in order to complete this task, I shall venture into it, just as an elephant tormented by the midday sun plunges into a cool, refreshing lake. When my strength declines, I should leave whatever I am doing in order to be able to continue with it later. Having done something well, I should put it aside, with the wish to accomplish what will follow. Just as an old warrior approaches the sword of an enemy upon the battlefront, so shall I avoid the weapons of disturbing conceptions or mental afflictions and skillfully bind this enemy. If someone dropped a sword during a battle, they would immediately pick it up out of fear. Likewise, if I lose the weapon of mindfulness, I should quickly retrieve it, being afraid of hell. Just as poison spreads throughout the body in dependence upon the circulation of blood, likewise, if disturbing conception find an opportunity, unwholesomeness will permeate my mind. So in order to have strength for everything, I should recall before and to take any action. The advice in the chapter on conscientiousness, and then joyfully rise to the task. So just as the wind blowing back and forth controls the movement of a piece of cotton, so shall I be controlled by joy, and in this way accomplish everything. So that is the end of the chapter 7. And next, having developed enthusiasm in this way, I should place my mind in concentration. For the person whose mind is distracted dwells between the fangs of disturbing emotions. However, through solitude of body and mind, no distraction will occur. Therefore, I should forsake the worldly life and completely discard distorted conceptions. So, since this chapter is called meditation, it teaches how to develop single-pointed concentration. So having understood that disturbing conceptions are completely overcome by superior insight endowed with calm abiding, first of all, I should search for calm abiding. This is achieved through the genuine joy of those unattached to the worldly life. So the things which you are attached to, and the one who is attached to, and the attachment itself, all three are impermanent, subject to change. So because of obsession, one transcendent being has four other transcendent beings. They will not see their beloved ones again for many thousands of lives. Not seeing them, I am unhappy, and my mind cannot be settled in equipoise. Even if I see them, there is no satisfaction, and as before, I am tormented by craving. Through being attached to living beings, I am completely obscured by the perfect reality. By disillusionment with cyclic existence perishes, and in the end, I am tortured by sorrow. By thinking only of them, this life will pass without any meaning. Furthermore, impermanent friends and relatives will even destroy the Dharma, which leads to a permanent liberation. If I behave in the same way as the childish, I shall certainly proceed to lower realms, and if I am led there by those unequal to the noble ones, what is the use of entrusting myself to the childish? One moment they are friends, and in the next instant they become enemies. Since they become angry, even in joyful situations, it is difficult to please ordinary people. So when we talk about living as hermit, it is about not associating with the childish and living in places which are distant from the towns and villages. And so these places of solitude are the ones that are remote from the towns and villages. They are angry with something of benefit. When something of benefit is said, and they also turn me away from what is beneficial. If I do not listen to what they say, they become angry and hence proceed to lower realms. They are envious of superiors, competitive with equals, arrogant with inferiors, conceited with praised, and if anything unpleasant is said, they become angry. Never is any benefit derived from the childish. Through associating with the childish, there will certainly ensue unwholesomeness, such as praising myself, belittling others, and discussing the joys of a cyclic existence. Devoting myself to others in this way will bring about nothing but a misfortune, because they will not benefit me, and I shall not benefit them. If there are someone who despises me, verse number 21 of chapter 8, what pleasure can I have in being praised? If there is another who praises me, what displeasure can I have in being despised? So these are very interesting points Shantideva is making. And if even the conqueror was unable to please the various inclinations of different beings, then what need to mention a malicious person as such as I? Therefore I should give up the intention to associate with the worldly. They scorn those who have no material gain, and so forth. So verse number 26 down shows seeking solitude. When dwelling in caves, in empty shrines, and at the feet of trees, never look back, cultivate detachment. When shall I come to dwell in places not clung to as mine, which are by nature wide and open, and where I may behave as I wish without attachment? When I shall come to live without fear, having just a begging bowl and a few ore things, wearing clothes not wanted by anyone, and not even having to hide this body, having departed to the cemeteries. When shall I come to understand that this body of mine and the skeletons of others are equal in being subject to decay? Then, because of its odor, not even the foxes will come close to this body of mine, for this is what will become of it. So this body, which is full of filth, reflecting on this, you do meditation on the four mindfulnesses. Mindfulness of body, mind, sensation, and those of the phenomena. Although this body arose as one thing, the bones and flesh with which it was created will break up and separate. How much more so will friends and others? At birth I was born alone, and at death too I shall die alone. As this pain cannot be shared by others, what use are obstacle-making friends? In the same way as travelers on a highway leave one place and reach another, likewise those traveling on the path of conditioned existence leave one birth and reach another, until the time comes for this body to be supported by the four pallbearers, while the worldly stands around stricken with grief. Until then I shall retire to the forest. Befriending no one and begrudging no one, my body will dwell alone in solitude, if I am already counted as a dead man. When I die, there will be no mourners. And as there will be no one around to disturb me with this mourning, dear mourning, thus there will be no one to distract me from my recollection of the Buddha. Therefore I shall dwell alone, happy and contented with few difficulties in very joyful and beautiful forests, pacifying all distractions. Verse number 42 down shows that of the disadvantage or faults of the attachment to this the desire realm are nothing other than skeletons. They are not autonomous and are identityless. Rather than being so desirous and completely obsessed, why do I not go to the state beyond sorrow instead? In the first place, I made efforts to lift her veil, and when it was raised, she bashfully looked down. Previously, whether anyone looked or not, her face was covered with a cloth. Yet, now, why do I run away upon directly beholding this face, which disturbs the mind, as it is being revealed to me by the vultures? Previously, I was completely protected her body. When others cast their eyes upon it, why, miser, do I not protect it now, while it is being devoured by these birds? Since vultures and others are eating this pile of meat that I behold, why did I offer flower garlands, sandalwood, and ornaments to that which is now the food of others? If I am threatened by the skeletons I see, even though they do not move, why am I not threatened by walking corpses, which are moved around by few impulses? Although I am attached to it when it is covered with skin, why do I not desire it when it is uncovered? Since I have no need for it then, why copulate with it when it is covered? Since both excrement and saliva arise solely from food, why do I dislike excrement and find joy in saliva? Cotton, too, is soft to touch, but while I find no sexual delight in a pillow, I think that women's body does not emit a putrid odor. Lustful one, you are confused as to what is unclean, thinking that they cannot sleep with this cotton, although it is soft to the touch. Confused, negative and lustful people become angry towards it instead. If I'm not attached to this unclean, to what is unclean, then why do I copulate with the lower parts of others' body, which are merely cages of bones tied together with muscles, plastered over with the mud of flesh? I myself contain many unclean things, which I constantly have to experience. So why, because of an obsession for uncleanliness, do I desire other bags of filth? But it is the flesh that I enjoy. It is the flesh that I enjoy. If this is what I wish to touch and behold, why do I not desire in it in its natural state, devoid of any mind? Furthermore, any mind
English translation. English translation.
Kimi. Hamas, svin. Kolis. Si kolis, ja, så det. Ah. So some sell their own body, and His Holiness comments that this deals with that of the feudal system. Due to the torment involved in collecting, protecting, and finally losing it, I shall realize the wealth to be fraught with infinite problems. So these lines are teaching us the faults or the disadvantages of our wealth and resources that we accrue. In the same way as animals drawing carriages are only able to eat a few mouthfuls of grass, likewise desirous people having many disadvantages such as these are little profit, and since even animals can obtain this little profit, those who are pained by their previous actions waste their leisure and enjoyment so difficult to find for the sake of something trivial that is not so scarce. And so verse number 89 says, having in such ways as these thought about the excellence of solitude, I should completely pacify distorted conceptions or mental afflictions and meditate on awakening mind. And so from this down, it shows the practice of Bodhisattva. So first of all, I should make an effort to meditate upon the equality between self and others. So the equality of self and others is in the sense that all sentient beings, including yourself, are equal in wanting happiness and to avoid the suffering. I should protect all beings as I do myself, because we are all in wanting pleasure, equal in wanting pleasure and not wanting pain. Although there are many different parts and aspects, such as their hand, as a body that is to be protected, they are one. Likewise, all different sentient beings in their pleasure and their pain have a wish to be happy that is the same as mine. So all sentient beings have the experience of pain and pleasure. So all sentient beings are equal, like myself, in wanting happiness. The suffering that I experience does not cause any harm to others, if you say that, but that suffering is mine because of my conceiving of myself as I. Thereby it becomes unbearable. Likewise, the misery of others does not befall me. Nevertheless, by conceiving of others as I, their suffering becomes mine. Therefore, it too should be hard to bear. So since both myself and others as equal in wanting happiness. If you only think that your happiness alone is more important, I mean, there's no reason. So we all don't want suffering, and not thinking, therefore, about eliminating other suffering is wrong. So if you say that the suffering of others does not actually harm you, then why do you also work for to avoid the suffering in the future as well? If you say that sentient beings need to work for themselves to overcome suffering, then it says, surely whenever there is suffering, the sufferer must protect themselves from it. Yet the suffering of the foot is not that of the hand. Why then does one protect the other? Although this may not be justified, it is done because of grasping at a self. Yet surely whatever is not justified to myself and others should at all costs be rejected. Such thing as a continuum and an aggregation are false in the same way as prayer beads and an army. There is no real honor of suffering. Therefore, who has control over it? There being no inherent honor of suffering, there can be no distinction at all between that of myself and others. In verse number 102:3, done. And then next it says, since this compassion will bring much misery, why should I exert myself to develop it? So of course when you develop genuine compassion, wishing others to be out of suffering, there is some discomfort that you experience. But should I contemplate the suffering of living beings, how could the misery of compassion be more? So with compassion there is an inner strength that you develop. So when you actually take on the suffering of others onto yourself, I mean, there is this kind of a inner strength and within you. Whereas if you are bogged down by suffering of yourself alone, thinking, I mean, I'm suffering, I mean, then there is no such courage. If by some person's suffering, the suffering of many would be destroyed, surely kind-hearted people would accept it for the sake of themselves and others. Thus the Bodhisattva Supushpachandra, although aware of the harm of king would cause him, accepted his own suffering in order to eradicate the miseries of others. So if you remain selfish and still go meditate on suffering, I mean, there's no way you can overcome your cognitive obscurations at all. So therefore, just as I protect myself from unpleasant things, however small, in the same way I should act towards others with compassionate and caring mind. So when you are able to acquaint your mind with these practices of compassion, such as compassion and so forth, these experiences would arise in you rather automatically. Although the basis is quite impersonal, through constant familiarity, I have come to regard the drops of sperm and blood of others as I. So, in the same way, why should I be unable to regard the bodies of others as I? Hence, it is not difficult to see that my body is also that of others. Having seen the mistakes of cherishing myself and the ocean of good in cherishing others, I shall completely reject all selfish and accustom myself to accepting others. In the same way as the hands and so forth, as regards regarded as limbs of the body, likewise, why are the embodied creatures not regarded as limbs of life? Through acquaintance has the thought of I arisen towards this impersonal body. So in the similar way, why should it not arise towards other living beings? When I work in this way for the sake of others, I should not let conceit or the feeling that I am wonderful arise. It is just like feeding myself. I hope for nothing in return. Therefore, just as I protect myself from the unpleasant things, however slight, in the same way I should habituate myself to have a compassionate and caring mind towards others. It is out of this great compassion that the Lord of Avalokiteshvara even blessed his name to dispel the nervousness of beings among other people. I should not turn away from what is difficult, for by the power of familiarity I may be made unhappy, even when someone whose name once frightened me is not around. Thus, whoever wishes to quickly afford protection to both myself and other beings should practice that holy secret, the exchanging of self for others. So, because the pain and pleasure that we have on our body is very obvious to us, therefore this text also deals with the attachment to one's body. So, what adept would desire, protect and venerate this body? Who would not scorn it and regard it as an enemy? Because of attachment to my body, even a small object of fear frightens me, so who would not revile as an enemy this body that gives rise to fear, and so forth. Verse number 225, if I give this, what shall I have left to enjoy? Such selfish thinking is the way of ghost. If I enjoy this, what shall I have left to give? Such selfless thinking is a quality of the gods. If for my own sake I cause harm to others, I shall be tormented in hellish realms. But if, for the sake of others, I cause harm to myself, I shall acquire all that is magnificent. By holding myself in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. But should this attitude be shifted to others, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. If I employ others for my own purposes, I myself shall experience servitude. But if I use myself for the sake of others, I shall experience only lordliness. Whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy, and whatever suffering there is in the world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. What need is there to say much more? The childish 130, and the next verse says, if I do not actually exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cycling I shall have no joy. So this is a very powerful stanza. So whether it's mundane matters such as economy and so forth, if you are selfish, you will not have happiness. So if I do not exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence I shall have no joy, let alone what is beyond this world. Because my servant do not work, and because my masters give me no pay, even the need of this life will not be fulfilled. By rejecting the method that establishes both foreseeable and unforeseeable joy, I cast magnificent delight completely aside, and then, because of inflicting miseries on others, in confusion, I seize hold of unbearable pain. If all the injury, fear, and pain in this world arise from grasping at the self, then what use is that great ghost to me? If I do not completely forsake it, I shall be unable to put an end to suffering, just as I cannot avoid being burned if I do not cast aside the fire I hold. Therefore, in order to allay the harms inflicted upon me, and in order to pacify the sufferings of others, I shall give myself up to others, and cherish them as I do my very self. I'm under the control of others. So for the sake of myself, I should not do anything with these eyes and so forth, which I have left at the disposal of others. It is quite incorrect to do anything with them which is contrary to the benefit of others. Thus, sentient beings should be my main concern. Whatever I behold upon my body, I should rob and use for the benefit of others. So then the next verses deal with some exercise, considering lesser beings and so forth as myself, and considering myself as others. In the following way, I should meditate upon envy, competitiveness, and self-importance. So first, you have somebody higher than yourself, considering yourself as the lower. So he's honored, but I'm not. I have not found wealth such as he. He's praised, but I'm despised. He's happy, but I suffer. I have to do all the work while he remains comfortably at ease. He is renowned as great in this world, but as inferior, with no good qualities at all. But what do I mean? What do you mean? I have no good qualities. I have all good qualities compared to many, as he is inferior. He's inferior, and compared to many, I am high. The deteriorated state of my morals and views is not due to me, but due to my disturbing conceptions. In whatever way he is able, he should heal me. Willingly, I shall accept any discomfort involved, but I'm not being healed by him. By all means, I shall make clear to the entire world all the good qualities I have, but I shall not let anyone hear of any good qualities he may have. Also, I shall hide all my faults. I will be venerated, but not he. I will find a great deal of material gain, and will be honored, but he shall not. For a long time I shall look with pleasure at this being made inferior. He will become the laughingstock of all, regarding among everyone as an object of scorn and derision. For hundreds of times in this cycle of rebirth, he has caused harm to me. So these lines in verse number 154 down shows the disadvantages or faults of self-cherishing. Because of desiring to benefit yourself, O mind, all weariness you have gone through over countless past eons has only succeeded in achieving misery. Therefore, I shall definitely engage myself in working for the benefit of others. For since the words of Mighty One are infallible, I shall behold its advantages in the future. So it's almost at 11:30. Cautious. So the practice of equaling and exchanging self and others actually shows and teaches us the disadvantages of cherishing oneself alone over others. It only has disadvantages of bringing suffering and ruin to oneself. Whereas we have been accustomed to cherishing oneself over others, from now on, based on these texts like this, we should now switch this attitude of cherishing oneself with cherishing others over oneself, seeing the benefits of it. So in this life or next lives, and ultimately reaching the highest goal of enlightenment, cherishing others over oneself, you should reflect on all kinds of benefits it has, and also see the faults, all kinds of faults of cherishing oneself over others.